I actually even have a picture sometimes I'll look at that's from my Fitbit data that day. And you can actually see it goes from,
Oh
like
my
normal heart
God.
rate up
You
to
are such a
that
nerd.
point.
Like you actually still have a quantified measurement of your
Yeah,
terror,
it's
essentially, that
actually
happened.
got it right
Oh,
there.
you
You can
gotta
see.
be kidding me. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to Educative Sessions. My name is Lee Ngol, and I am the community manager here at Educative. Educative makes it easy for authors to provide interactive and adaptive courses for software developers. And Educative Sessions is a multi episodic campaign to engage people in the developer world about their coding experiences. Today's guest is Sage Elliott. Sage Elliott is a machine learning developer, evangelist for Sixskill. And the title of today's talk is People Are Awesome, Why You Shouldn't Fear Public Speaking. Sage, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. I just want to say that Lee, you are awesome.
Oh, you. Way to set up your own compliment like that with the title that you decided. I love it. So without further ado, let's begin. Sage, what an interesting topic that you chose to speak with us today. You wanted to talk about public speaking, specifically your fear of public speaking, which is something, despite the many years I've known you, I've never known that about you. So, when did you first realize you had a fear of public speaking?
It's something I hide really well. No, the when
Okay.
I actually first kind of like realized that it was something that I feared and actually like felt like physical effects from like having a really high heart rate was actually um, about like 3 years ago, sometime in the fall 2017. I was working at a startup and we were getting some students from UW's engineering capstone kind of project where you could recruit students to come work at your company and get some like real life experience instead of doing a personalized capstone. And at that event, we had to talk and like pitch about our product, like what we were doing at our company and why someone would want to work there in a room of like well over 100 people, maybe like 200 people or something. And I think that was actually kind of the first time in my adult life where I had to do something like that, be in front of that many people and talk about something. And I was like, oh, I don't think I've done this before. And I felt really uncomfortable doing it, extreme discomfort. I actually even have a picture sometimes I'll look at that's from my Fitbit data that day. And you can actually see it goes from,
Oh
like
my
normal heart
God.
rate up
You
to
are such a
that
nerd.
point.
Like you actually still have a quantified measurement of your
Yeah,
terror,
it's
essentially, that
actually
happened.
got it right
Oh,
there.
you
You can
gotta
see
be kidding me.
you can see that the spike right there, it's like normal during the day, and then
Oh
it goes
my
to like
gosh.
145 or something, which is like what I get when I'm like go running or something like that. So it's just
First,
really interesting to be like, wow.
I understand I'm being mean, but that is still very nerdy. That like that's something that you did in the moment, despite being incredibly stressed, that also retained as a token of that memory. And like you mentioned that you are in this space of community building and technology evangelism, and you've been in this space for quite some time. This is a role that requires public speaking. So how did you manage this issue, especially in the moment that you were in?
Yeah, I think, well, in the moment, I just had to do it and it was awful. There wasn't anything I really did special in that moment to get over because it was, again, that was something I didn't even realize until that point, I think, where I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is some sort of issue that I have. Like I had been kind of doing some community building with smaller meetups, but never again really up in front of 100 people, a lot more kind of one-on-one or with several people at kind of some smaller meetup events, but never actually being like a presenter or anything like that. So this is the first time I had that experience.
Right, right. So
And so to get
yeah,
over it afterwards, or
sorry.
I forget if your question was asking how do I get over it or in that moment only.
Oh well, I mean, let's take it step by step. So the first part is that first moment where you had to speak. It didn't go very well. Is that correct?
I mean, it didn't go awful,
Okay.
but yeah, it wasn't great. Like words fumbled out of my mouth. I didn't say all the things I wanted to say. I was like, how can I get off stage as quick as possible?
Oh man. I mean,
But
what was
no
that?
one hurt me.
Okay, but what was like the crowd's response, or I guess amongst the peers or the person who asked you to speak? Like, did they say, "Oh, it's fine"?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was fine. It wasn't like the event had a lot writing on it or anything like that. And there was definitely other people you could tell were also very uncomfortable or inexperienced at speaking to crowds in that room. So I wasn't the only one that probably had that type of experience that day.
Right, right. And I mean, in all fairness, for a lot of people who are jumping into things like evangelism, and coming from the space like technology, it's a weird skill set. It's a weird brain shift for people to go from one to the other, and I think over time that's something that people develop. So, uh, what happened subsequently from that moment? Like, did you decide to improve the skill, or was there some kind of work that you did to get yourself better at it?
It was ever since that moment was kind of like a little bit of an itch where it's like, oh, like why does that exist and like how can I get over that type of thing? Because it was kind of something I wanted to do even if it wasn't like a professional career. I really like sharing stuff that I work on or getting people interested or excited about something new, like learning to program and sharing that knowledge with people, especially for people who've never done it before. So it was kind of something I wanted to do, but I didn't really think of any avenues how to necessarily improve it besides potentially doing more talks and getting used to it that way. And so actually several months after that, because I think it was May 2018, I started my first evangelist job. Because before that, I was a hardware and software engineer, never actually had the job title of like developer advocate or evangelist or anything like that. So never really any professional community facing.
Right.
So then I started that, and I had to do a lot of workshops.
And this is the work that you did with Galvanize, right?
Yeah, so that was with Galvanize, and I was with Galvanize for about 2 years, and in that time, I think I taught something like over 60 workshops and produced. That means kind of being involved in talking at other events, but not running the entire thing. At something like 200 plus events in that amount of time. So a lot of experience. And a lot of kind of changing my mindset around being uncomfortable isn't always a bad thing. Where it's telling me something that it's telling me that there is room to grow in that area, especially something like that where I'm being uncomfortable in a situation where I know no one's actually going to hurt me and I'm not actually going to die if I fail at it, even if I completely just went up on stage and walked off the stage without saying anything. I don't think anything really bad would happen to me.
Right. And yet, public speaking is still considered, if not the one of the greatest fears amongst a lot of people, or greatest phobias, I should say, because like you just mentioned, there's something irrational about it, right? There's no real threat to your life in doing so. But for some reason, it's just a collection of a lot of different anxieties that play out the way they do. Uh, you and I, of course, have a shared history in that we have both worked the same position at Galvanize. Uh, me back in 2015 to 2017, and then you in 2018 to just this year. And but I found that you and I have very different skill sets, I would say. Because when I was doing that role, I did not really shy away from the public speaking side, but I've been doing public speaking training when I was in like my early teens. That was something that was really cultivated in me. The thing that I actually was terrified about, that I would get a lot of flack and a lot of stress over, was the technological side. So I'd love for you to talk a lot about, like, you're someone who comes at things like a coder. Why is it that you might be scared of public speaking, but I am terrified of code? Even to this day, I'm still worried about like doing things in a certain way.
I think it comes down to having experience doing it. Like at least that's my experience. The more I do something, the more comfortable I am with it, right? So if you did a lot of public speaking as a teenager and onward, and you're pretty comfortable with it, you probably don't feel very terrified because you've done it so many times, and you know that the result is never awful after doing it, right? But maybe you haven't done a lot of programming, and programming in front of people is a little bit scary, and you're worried that if you do that badly, something will happen.
Wonderful. We actually have a question from the audience. This question is from Cecilia. Uh, with all of your experience in public speaking now, do you still have this fear? Right. And if you do, what have you done to move beyond it?
Yeah, I would say I don't really have the fear like I did before. which is kind of like every time before I did a talk and during the talk, I would be dreading it and be dreading people's reactions afterwards. Some days I'll still have a little bit of like flight or fight instinct, and I think most people do if you're getting up to talk on stage, or even nowadays doing a ton of virtual events. You can have 140 people in a chat room as you're on something like a Zoom call. And I think that now I don't feel the dread because, again, I've done it so many times where I know the worst thing that's going to happen is really nothing, right? But the title of this is People Are Awesome. And I think because I've done so many of these workshops and the people are amazing at them, whether it's virtually or in person, at least in Seattle, where I've done most of my talks, and some in San Francisco. You know, the tech community is so supportive, and people are so happy that you're there teaching them something new, or giving them some sort of piece of new knowledge. I've never had someone once be like, this was awful and terrible, and I can't believe I sat through this whole thing or something. You know, you'll have people leave probably on Zoom. Your content isn't going to always be for everyone, and people have busy schedules. I've gone to a lot of virtual events and left in the middle, not because it was bad, but just because I had something else to do. So never let that really get you down either. But I think a lot of it comes down to just kind of changing your mindset that you know, you're not going to die. That was kind of, I think, even in the description, you know, the first time I taught a workshop, I was like, oh my gosh, this just feels awful. And then you end it and you didn't die. And it's actually really rewarding seeing people learn something new from that you're teaching them and being happy about it. People like to stay connected, like on LinkedIn. They'll often send follow-up messages to saying how wonderful it was and really happy they got to learn something new, which is great.
Still on this topic, you know, you've gained a lot of wisdom traveling around and also doing a lot of talks locally as well. And for a lot of people, this is still a huge, huge issue for them. What kinds of lessons or what kinds of practices would you suggest for them to help overcome this fear?
Again, I think doing it is the most important thing, but you can do it in ways that are more approachable. And that's kind of true with you trying to do anything new, I think, or learning something new. Break it into smaller pieces or start smaller. So if you've never done any talk before at all, or have trouble interacting with groups of any size, you know, do something small, like host a very small meetup, or even just go to a meetup, even if you're not hosting it, and try to talk to everyone. Because I know a lot of people that also like go to meetups, but they're even scared to start a conversation with someone, or they don't feel comfortable doing that, right? And so like getting used to doing that and just being around more in public, I think can really help. But also doing something like hosting something with a little bit more structure, perhaps like a book club. Right now is a really good time because you can host like a technical book club over Zoom on a meetup group. Say you want to run something. And that gives you kind of some structure of like what to run through, but you're not necessarily like making a whole original presentation or live coding, which is also something that can freak people out, even if they're interested, even if they're okay with public speaking and coding. Live coding is different.
Absolutely. So many more variables. Wow. We are just actually running up to the end of time for us, which is surprising because there's so many more things I'd love to talk about. But I want to give you at least enough ample time to talk about the exciting work that you're doing as an evangelist with your new company. So Sage, please, like whatever you'd like to share, feel free to let it be a shameless plug of sorts. This is really in a way as a thank you to sharing a bit of your story for you to just open up about the work you're doing.
First of all, I just want to say if anyone wants to stay connected and they have any other questions about getting started with public speaking, you can feel free to message me at any of the places. Twitter, I'm at Sage Codes. LinkedIn, I'm Sage Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's. Hopefully I'll come up with any misspelling. Often people always spell Elliott with 1 L and 1 T. It's totally fine. And then, yeah, I'm working at a company called Sick.
I misspelled your name. I know you're so long.
Corrected so many times.
I've misspelled your name so many. Even as we were setting up this call, even when we're hanging out socially, I have misspelled your name. There's too many L's and not enough T's. I don't know. It's
I almost never ever care about it, except for when it's like an official document, like saying you're buying something important or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good important time to care.
Then I'll correct them. Otherwise, I don't really care.
Fair.
But yes, so I'm doing work at a company called SixSkill. You can go to sixskill.com to read more about it. We're doing really cool work of bringing AI and making it available to a lot more industries by making a platform that actually just makes it really easy, specifically around computer vision. So you can collect data, label data, train your models, and actually deploy all in one system pretty seamlessly. And a big aspect that actually got me interested in the company is actually even just the data annotation, the labeling tool. If you've ever done labeling for computer vision, you probably know it's awful. And that's one thing we're making way better. So I'm really excited about that. And that was actually my first thing that got me interested in SixSkill. And I'm also hosting workshops usually using that tool and as kind of an intro to computer vision almost every month. So you can keep an eye out for that. Those are posted either on my LinkedIn or just at sageelliott.com.
Wonderful. Sage, I have a feeling these conversations are not over between us. And there's like a host of other things we could talk about. At some point, we're probably going to talk about pro wrestling, but that's I'll have to have a conversation internally about whether that's appropriate. We can make it work. We will make it work. But really appreciate you sharing, honestly, I mean, sincerely, not in our usual facetious, like tongue-in-cheek way. This is an important issue, I think, for a lot of people within the developer community. And your experiences, I hope, will give a lot more people confidence and the willingness to try to break through, which is otherwise a crippling issue for them. So thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate that. We've come to very much the end of our show. So really want to thank our guest, Sage Elliott, for speaking. Sage Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's. Please remember that. Mostly
All the L's,
all the L's,
T's.
all the L's, and all just as many L's as you feel comfortable. And please keep an eye out on our social media for our next talk that's happening just after the weekend. Lastly, of course, if you want to learn more about us, check us out at educative.io. So for all of us here at Educative, happy learning. Thank you all so much. Thanks so much for watching our session. Be sure to watch more sessions below and subscribe to our channel to get the latest stories. Also, follow us on social media and check us out at educative.io. Happy learning.